Hello, everybody. My name is Lois Van Hey, and I'm going to present you my work on anxiety-sensitive planning, from formal foundations to algorithms and application. This is a work I conducted with Laurent Jean-Pierre and Abdelillah Modib, both at the University of Umeå and at the University of Caen in France. A few words about myself. What I like in research is to make computational models of human cognitions, both to introduce it within classic problem solving, to make them human-centric and include human factors, and with notable applications on robotics. And as a classic tool I like to use is Markov decision processes. And I also like social simulation in order to reproduce human-like behavior that is useful for dealing for a situation such as the COVID crisis. And today I'm going to talk about anxiety, and we can start with an example of anxiety-inducing situation. So let's imagine we could meet in person. We all go to a nice place to meet and discuss, and then it usually involves to take the plane to go to that destination. And usually what is tied to the plane is the quiet travel to the conference. And it starts on the day before to say, oh yeah, why do I need to start when I need to start moving in order to get my plane? And you get something usually by searching into the classic AI-based itinerary generator, you get something like this. Which is usually the fastest route, which is very good on the one hand. But on the other hand, these trajectories are usually relatively stressful. So if you miss one connection, then you miss your whole flight. And that's something you really don't want to happen. And metro are quite irregular, so usually, yeah, people they tend to be very stressed and to make sure they can get to their destination. And it's a lot of stress that is not only common for planning in that regard, for path planning, but it's actually an overall paradigm for artificial intelligence. So AI systems usually they tend to over-optimize, to seek to get the best out of every resources and second that is available. But then you get to these very tight plans that can actually lead to a lot of uncertainty and little slack for anything to occur. As an example, a nice trajectory that would not fit into this first result would be a direct shuttle that would take 50 minutes to get to the destination, that never arrives late, and that starts every 20 minutes. And then when you're there, you know for sure that you will get to the destination in due time, and there is no stress about it. And if you miss one, then there is no stress, you will get the next one. So the goal that we want to achieve with this work is to generate plans that balance, on the one hand, reward optimization, in that case, time minimization, and on the other hand, the quantity of experience anxiety that you have by applying this kind of plan from this very tight route that is very by the second to this very cool plan that leads you to the destination for sure. So one of and we pick anxiety because it's actually a very important topic, and that comes with a lot of side effect. So when we think about anxiety, we can think of stressing about a paper or a presentation, having a bit of insomnia for the next day. But actually, over time, when it starts to accumulate, it's a strong factor that correlates with a lot of quite nasty outcomes that can occur to people's mental health, from depression, phobia, schizophrenia, but also physical health and notably cardiovascular issues. There are some clear correlations between made, and when it's looked at society-wide matter, if we just focus on the numbers, it is assumed to be a social cost of $2.5 trillion on a yearly basis. As a matter of comparison, the cigarette we have there, the smoking, is nearly half of this total estimated social cost on a yearly basis. So it's an important matter for which institutions, from governments to international spaces such as Sustainable Development Goals, start to take into account. It's also a matter that touches people from different classes differently, that also needs to be considered for AI systems of tomorrow to be more fair. So beside this motivation, what we wanted to do is to have to make a fair model of anxiety, and then to look which is strongly based into anxiety as defined by psychology, not just an idea what we have and then we make some kind of related model, but really to look at the psychology and what they have to say. And psychology actually has a lot to say. Anxiety is a huge topic, but they mostly come with a lot of correlations. The anxiety correlates with depression, for example, but not so many models on how to do so. There are a few, and we compile them into the paper. So in a few words, anxiety is seen as a negative emotion. So there's a trigger that causes the emotion. Then you experience a higher an arousal regarding this emotion, which indirectly leads to some coping behavior that should cancel out the triggering factor. In that case, for anxiety, the trigger is uncertainty. When you're exposed to uncertainty because stakes are high or threats are important, then you start to experience anxiety. And an important aspect is that it's uncertainty not only about immediate reward, but also about future reward. The presentation that you make tomorrow, you see some kind of uncertainty rising from that. So you're stressing today for something that will come tomorrow. As coping behavior, the classic approach is indeed behavior that does seek to avoid uncertainty. And the classic one is to seek control, maybe pragmatic, so getting more control, grasp over the physical world or the world around you, to epistemic control, to know better, or to have to make some planning and over planning, and a lot of some kind of rumination that can come there. But besides coping, there are also anxiety also raises, unfortunately, a lot of dysfunctional forms of coping. So, for example, it can be looking away, so distracting yourself, or taking substances, or procrastinating, or sometimes self-sabotage, like failing the goal just to remove the uncertainty of whether you might succeed it or not, which is actually very common. There is, beside this coping, there is also long-term damage that can occur. Because anxiety is cognitively exhausting, then the brain ends up getting into some forms of trying not to avoid this experience overall, and sometimes it can be give up. Oh, I don't try to get new goals, for example, or I assume that the goals are going to be failed, and therefore which is tightly correlated to some form of depressive behavior where you don't try new things. Based on this theoretical foundation, we also propose into the paper a model of anxiety. So, of course, when we say decision and uncertainty and considering the future, Markov decision processes immediately come to the equation. With a focus on, notably in that case, reward uncertainty. So we focus on the uncertainty regarding the reward that you might get into the future, depending on the policies that you follow. So just to give a few glimpses over the technicalities. So basically we take some classic NTP and we provide some formalism to expand it for modeling present and future uncertainty. So in a few words, without necessarily getting into detail. So we expand the instant reward with a model of uncertainty, which regards not only, so classic model, they only look at the value distribution, the expected value that you can get from a given state for a policy. And in our case, we look at all the possible values that you can get given a state. So not only the agglomerated average probabilistically, but also all the possible one that can come. And the broader the type of future reward you can get, of future value you can get, the higher is the anxiety. So this corresponds to the instant anxiety, and what we seek to achieve is to reduce the cumulated anxiety. So how much of this instant anxiety you're being exposed over time. That's what we try to optimize. And as a solution, we have we generated two models that takes as an input any Markov decision process and a weight factor that allows to define the balancing. And then as an output, it generates a policy or a plan that balance on the one hand raw performance, raw reward, and on the other hand the quantity of anxiety that the plan is related to. How much uncertainty over time is the person applying that plan is going to experience. And for that, we have one general model that is called AIMDPs, and a fast version of it that allows to get to practical resolutions. And beside these two models, we propose two validations. One, which is the direct application of path planning that we expanded. So we took an OpenStreetMap, and then we said that for these major allays, your average go faster than with smaller path, but these routes are a bit more uncertain. And then so the classic algorithm, of course, goes to the faster ones, whereas the anxiety avoiding one tends to follow safer, more regular routes. And we also demonstrate the applicability of this approach, that is applicable for any existing model. So if you already have a solution based on Markov decision processes, actually you can use anxiety sensitive Markov decision processes that we develop to already include some anxiety sensitive component within your existing model. But beside this, so there are some interesting findings. So on the one hand, so the trajectories that are generated, they do follow the strategies that are followed by humans that lead to lower anxiety, as observed in psychology. And if we look at the kind of trade-off that can be made from a numerical standpoint, we managed to cut short 92% of the anxiety metric that we included into the paper for roads that are in average 10% longer. So there is a lot way to cut off a lot of anxiety without so much necessarily so much cost in terms of performance. Another form of validation is to replicate human-like sensitive behavior. And for this, we generated full scenarios of increasing sensitivity to anxiety. So here is the classic example of a robot that goes from a starting point to a goal, and then every time it moves forward, it can slide on a neighboring tile. And if it hits, it might hit an obstacle here, and if that happens, the system gets a penalty. The purely rational approach consists in selecting the shortest plan while still avoiding whatever possible to get too close to an obstacle, because the reward is not too bad. But now, as we start to increase the anxiety sensitivity, then the system switches. So in that case, the system prefers to go to this path, which is a little bit actually risky than the other one, but it has the benefit of as soon as you're here, then you're no longer exposed to anxiety over time, and therefore you know for sure that you will reach your destination. When you keep increasing the sensitivity to anxiety, then it goes into this path that totally avoids any risk to hit an obstacle, even if it leads to a significantly lower effectiveness overall. And more interestingly, as an emerging phenomena that we were not expecting originally, but that was a very actually matching finding, is this one. So and the blue tiles correspond to the tiles where the system actually refuses to get towards the goal. So it selects a strategy that makes sure that, okay, no obstacle will be reached and the goal will not be reached. And this actually corresponds to a self-sabotage and giving up on the goal. With the principle that, okay, getting towards the goal, you might get there, but not 100% certain when. And therefore, well, if it's too far, you really don't want to be exposed to that uncertainty over time. So you rather fail it for sure than have a chance to get to the goal, but with some delays. And another one is this kind of self-destructive, where the agent actually goes through the obstacle and actually prefers to go through the obstacle for sure to have the mastery over its destiny, rather than maximal control, rather than getting into this area, which is a bit more uncertain and that the system prefers to avoid. So as a conclusion, so the paper lays the foundations for anxiety-sensitive planning. And that's only a first model that we hope to further develop into the future. So in this paper, we show that anxiety is a critical challenge to achieve human-centric artificial intelligence. And there is, which we put forward the extensive theoretical background from psychology, as well as some good theories for making for a good conceptual framework for making good models, and to continue the track of this form of modeling of anxiety-sensitive planning. Besides this, modeling anxiety can be done with classic AI tools, notably Markov decision processes. And here we have an example of it. And we proposed to model, and we tested it, validated that they do replicate anxiety avoiding behavior for human, and also human-like anxiety avoiding behavior. And we show that the model that we proposed not only can also be applicable for any existing Markov decision process for nearly free. So it's directly applicable. And we show that models of anxiety can be useful for reducing human anxiety, replicating human behavior, and are open for new pathways for new AI human-centric solutions. And last but not least, this is a track that I find fascinating, and I'm committed to continue. And I look forward for collaborations. So if you want to be in, please feel free to contact me. For the rest, thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to getting your questions. Bye.